I think the majority of you all understand the most basic premise that if other people have been sold tokens with a massive discount or a massive bonus, you're most likely not going to do as well when you invest into that ICO. To keep it simple, we'll give an example of an ICO where during the pre-sale tokens are sold for something like 5 cents a token. Then when you come to the main sale, suddenly tokens cost 10 cents. Effectively, you're paying double the price of the early investors. When tokens hit the exchanges, you're going to have a very different view to those early investors. Let's say tokens come out at 10 cents. For you, that means your tokens have remained at the exact same price you paid for them. But for those early investors, they've just doubled their money. Often this happens in a very short space of time. So it's understandable why some of these investors are going to think, let's cash out some of our funds. As a result of them selling their tokens, token prices will dip below the 10 cents that you paid for tokens. Hence, you've actually lost out by investing in that ICO, while early investors have still made decent profits. So when it comes to looking at the bonuses for ICOs, if you haven't got those bonuses yourself, you have to put yourselves in the shoes of the people who have got their bonuses and consider when they are likely to sell. Now, the concept behind that is pretty simple, really. When it comes to ICOs, if you're investing late, the last thing you want to see is a significant bonus that the early investors got. I'm sure all of you are aware of that already, but from speaking with many of you, there's another aspect which I believe many people have overlooked, and that is the number of tokens being sold with massive discounts or bonuses. Now, if we go back to that earlier example, there were two sections to the token sale. The first, where tokens were being sold for 5 cents a token, and the second, where they were being sold for 10 cents a token. If we assume that 50% was sold in the beginning and 50% was sold in the second sale, well, that's going to mean that 50% of investors have received an incredible discount. And when tokens hit exchanges, that means half of the overall investors might be considering taking some profits. Now let's play around with those numbers a little bit. Instead, let's assume that 90% of investors were able to get in at the early stage, and just 10% ended up paying 10 cents a token. With these numbers, you're gonna have 90% of investors potentially looking to secure profits. The selling power that 90% of investors have is obviously very significant, and they would have a large capability of pushing down the prices. What if we flip those numbers though? Instead, let's say that only 10% of investors got that big early discount and 90% didn't. Suddenly, even though you do have a significant discount, only 10% of investors got that discount. In reality, I think that would be relatively insignificant. Having run through those numbers, hopefully you guys can see the point that we're trying to get at. It's not just about the size of the bonus that some investors receive, it's also about the percentage of tokens being sold to those investors. The larger number of tokens being sold to them, the greater the selling power they're going to have, and thus they may push down prices. A great example of this is a project we reviewed recently called Lending Block. With Lending Block, there was originally a private sale followed by a pre-sale and then a main sale. Now, this original private sale had a 100% bonus for investors. If you've been subscribed to our channel for a while, you know how much we value token metrics, and this would usually put us off investing into a project because we'd be concerned that there would be a price dump after the ICO. But then you have to look at the next set of numbers, and that is the total number of tokens that were sold during the private sale. That number sits at just 5% of the total tokens, which is obviously a very small number. This doesn't quite paint the whole picture though, because that is 5% of the overall tokens, and not all tokens are being sold in the ICO. What you have to consider is the proportion of tokens being sold at a discount. In this case, that 5% of overall tokens represents 8% of the tokens being sold in all three of the sales combined. Once again, that is a very small number at just 8%. Hence, this is a very good example of where you have a very large bonus, but we aren't that concerned about a price dump after the tokens hitting the exchanges because it's such a small number of tokens that have been sold for this discount. In the case of Lending Block, there was also a pre-sale before the main sale, but that pre-sale only had a 20% bonus, which we believe is relatively common and pretty fair. To make this video more comprehensive, I'm going to use another example, and this one is something you guys should really be looking out for, because for us, it's a big red flag and something we would never invest in as a result. There's an upcoming ICO and the project is called TTC. I'll confess we haven't done a deep dive into the project because we saw these token metrics and they immediately put us off. There are so many ICOs launched every single day that to keep up with it, we can't do a deep dive into every single project. There are certain factors that we immediately look into, and if they're poor, we have to discard them because there are so many good investments out there. There really isn't much point wasting our time when the token metrics are very poor. In the case of TTC, if you head over to their website, you'll see that they have 3 sales planned. Number 1 was the private sale, number 2, the pre-sale, and then you have the main sale. For the pre-sale and the main sale, they have given the token prices, and the pre-sale bonus is not that significant that it would really consider putting us off. But for the private sale, they haven't even told us what they have sold tokens for, and therefore we have no idea whatsoever what the bonus was. It might have been just 30-40%. It might have been 100%. It might have been 1000%. The point is, without knowing the number, it immediately becomes a concern. Then if you look at the total number of tokens being sold, you realize that 50% of the overall tokens being sold in the sale went into that private sale. So basically 50% of tokens were sold at a discount that we do not know. I tried contacting them in Telegram and asking what the bonuses were during the private sale. They said they couldn't release that information yet, but hopefully could before the ICO began. Bearing in mind that the main sale begins just 24 hours after me asking this question, that's a big red flag. Now, as I say, I haven't done a deep dive into this project. It might well be a fantastic project, and hey, we could even come back to it at a later date and end up investing. But due to the poor token metrics at the ICO stage, it immediately becomes an unviable investment. One of the great things about cryptocurrencies is the ridiculously short time between the ICO and when it hits the public exchanges. If you invest into a regular company in an IPO, well, the shares aren't going to go public for usually around about 10 years. So with that, you have to make the decision of whether you want to invest in the IPO stage or whether you want to wait 10 years to invest in that company. In cryptocurrencies, because the time frame is so insignificant, making that decision is far, far easier. When you see poor token metrics at the ICO stage, to us, we just think, I'll have to pass on this ICO, but I could easily choose to invest when it hits the exchanges. If there are poor token metrics at the ICO, what we usually see is a token dump when the tokens hit the exchanges, causing prices to drop. And then if we really like the project, we can pick up tokens cheaper than the ICO, and we've only had to wait maybe a month or so. Our point here is that if you see a project at the ICO stage and you believe it has incredible potential, but it has terrible token metrics, don't worry, you don't have to invest in the ICO stage. You can simply pick up the tokens very shortly afterwards when they do hit the exchanges. While we're not offering any advice on specific projects, the advice I would offer for all of you is that you should consider the token metrics when investing into ICOs. And if you see large bonuses with a large proportion of tokens being sold during that bonus stage, you might want to consider staying away from the ICO and picking up tokens at a later date. I hope some of that advice can guide some of you in this crazy ICO and cryptocurrency investing space.